"To the happy couple," someone shouted, and I watched my mother-in-law's hand hover over my champagne glass for just a second too long. My heart stopped. I saw her fingers twitch, saw something small drop from her palm into the bubbling liquid. She did it so smoothly, so casually, like she was adjusting a napkin. But I caught it. I saw everything. My name is Tessa, and I just turned 26 years old 3 weeks ago. Today was supposed to be the best day of my life, my wedding day in Columbus, Ohio. The reception hall was beautiful, decorated with white roses and twinkling lights, exactly how I had imagined it. My new husband, Ethan, was across the room laughing with his college friends, completely oblivious to what his mother had just done. And there I was, sitting at the head table, staring at my poisoned champagne glass while everyone around me prepared for the toast. My mother-in-law, Diane, had never liked me. From the moment Ethan brought me home 2 years ago, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious son. I worked as a kindergarten teacher, which apparently wasn't impressive enough. She wanted him to marry someone from their country club, someone with a trust fund and a last name that opened doors. Instead, he chose me, a girl who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment and paid her own way through college. Diane had done everything she could to break us up. She called me at work to criticize my hair, my clothes, my career choices. She threw elaborate dinner parties and invited Ethan's ex-girlfriends, seating them right next to him, while I sat at the other end of the table. She even tried to convince Ethan to postpone the wedding 3 times, claiming she needed more time to plan, that we were rushing into things, that we barely knew each other. But Ethan loved me, and I loved him. We got engaged anyway. We set the date anyway. And today, despite all her efforts, we got married anyway. I looked at Diane now, sitting beside me in her overpriced designer dress, a fake smile plastered on her face. She had been unusually quiet during the ceremony, which should have been my first warning sign. Diane was never quiet. She always had something to say, some little comment designed to make me feel small. But today, she had barely spoken to me at all. She just watched me with those cold blue eyes, waiting for something. Now I knew what she had been waiting for. The toast was about to begin. Ethan's best man, Jordan, was standing up with his glass raised, ready to give his speech. Everyone in the room was reaching for their champagne. I could feel my hands shaking as I stared at my glass, the one Diane had just tampered with. Whatever she had put in there, it wasn't anything good. My mind raced. Should I say something? Should I call her out right here, in front of everyone? But what if I was wrong? What if I had imagined it? What if it was just a piece of lint or a crumb from the appetizers? I would look crazy. Diane would deny everything, and I would be the paranoid bride who accused her mother-in-law of poisoning her on her wedding day. No, I couldn't risk it. But I also couldn't drink from that glass. So I did the only thing I could think of. While Diane was looking away, greeting someone at the next table, I quickly switched our glasses. Hers had been sitting right next to mine, identical in every way. Same champagne, same amount, same delicate crystal stem. I moved them so fast, so smoothly, that no one noticed. 1 second, my poisoned glass was in front of me. The next second, it was in front of her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I grabbed the glass that was now in front of me, her original glass, and held it tight, trying to look calm. Diane turned back around and picked up what she thought was her own champagne without even glancing at it. Jordan started his speech. He talked about how he and Ethan had been friends since high school, how he had never seen Ethan happier than he was with me, how he knew we were going to have an amazing life together. Everyone laughed at his jokes, wiped away tears at the sweet parts, and when he finally raised his glass for the toast, the entire room stood up. "To Tessa and Ethan," Jordan said. "To Tessa and Ethan," everyone echoed. I watched Diane bring the glass to her lips. I watched her take a long sip, draining nearly half of it in one gulp. And then I took a tiny sip from my own glass, the one that had been hers, and tried not to think about what might have happened if I hadn't switched them. The toast ended. People sat back down. The music started playing again. Diane set her glass down and smiled at me, that same fake smile she had been wearing all day. I smiled back. And I waited. The first 20 minutes after the toast were completely normal. Diane sat beside me, picking at her salmon, making small talk with the guests at our table. She complimented the flowers, said something about the band being acceptable, and asked me if I had remembered to send thank you cards to her side of the family yet. I nodded and gave short answers, all while watching her carefully. Nothing seemed different. She looked fine. Maybe I really had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just lint, or maybe she had been reaching for something else, and I had misread the situation. I started to feel ridiculous for switching the glasses at all. But then, about 30 minutes after the toast, something changed. Diane suddenly stood up from her chair, swaying slightly. Her face was flushed, and she had this strange, glassy look in her eyes. She blinked a few times, like she was trying to focus, and then she giggled. Actually giggled. Diane never giggled. She barely even smiled genuinely. "Diane, are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound concerned. She waved me off. "I am fantastic," she said. Her words slightly slurred. "Absolutely fantastic. Have I told you how beautiful you look today, Tessa? Because you do. You look like a princess, a gorgeous, perfect princess." I froze. Diane had never complimented me before. Not once in 2 years. This was definitely not normal. Ethan came over, noticing his mother's strange behavior. "Mom, are you feeling all right?" "Oh, sweetheart." Diane threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over. "My beautiful boy, I am so proud of you. And Tessa is wonderful. I love her so much." Ethan and I exchanged confused looks. His mother had spent the last 2 years trying to convince him to dump me, and now she was declaring her love for me in front of the entire reception. "Maybe you should sit down," Ethan suggested gently. But Diane wasn't listening. She was looking around the room with wide eyes, like she was seeing it for the first time. "This music is terrible," she announced loudly. "We need better music, something fun, something we can dance to." Before anyone could stop her, she kicked off her designer heels and started dancing. Right there in the middle of the reception hall, in her expensive dress, she was dancing like she was at a nightclub. She swayed her hips, threw her hands in the air, and started singing along to the band's slow, romantic ballad as if it was a completely different song. The guests stared. Some laughed nervously. Others looked horrified. Ethan tried to guide his mother back to her seat, but she pushed him away playfully. "Dance with me," she insisted. "Come on, everyone. Let's dance." I should have felt bad for her. I should have been concerned. But all I could think about was what she had tried to do to me. Whatever she had put in that champagne, it was clearly some kind of drug. Something to make me act out, embarrass myself, ruin my own wedding. Maybe she thought I would start a fight with Ethan, or say something inappropriate to the guests, or just make a complete fool of myself in front of everyone we knew. Instead, she was the one making a fool of herself. And honestly, I wasn't sorry. Diane's behavior got worse as the minutes passed. She tried to grab the microphone from Jordan to make her own toast, rambling incoherently about how marriage was a beautiful thing, and how she had always known Ethan would find true love someday, even though she had spent 2 years trying to sabotage our relationship. She hugged random guests, complimented strangers on their outfits, and at one point, she tried to take a selfie with the wedding cake. Ethan was mortified. His father, Gregory, who had been mingling with guests, rushed over to try to control the situation. He took Diane by the arm and attempted to lead her outside, but she refused to go. "Why is everyone so serious?" she complained. "This is a wedding. We should be celebrating. We should be having fun." She pulled away from Gregory and stumbled toward the stage where the band was playing. Before anyone could stop her, she climbed up onto the small platform, nearly tripping over her own feet. The band stopped playing, unsure of what to do. Diane grabbed the microphone from the startled lead singer. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing through the speakers, "I have something very important to say." The room went completely silent. Everyone was staring at her. I could see people pulling out their phones, recording what was happening. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I just want to say," Diane continued, swaying slightly, "that I have not been very nice to my new daughter-in-law. I have been mean. I have been cruel. I have been a complete and total—" She paused, searching for the word. "I have been a witch. No, wait. I have been a—" "Mom!" Ethan shouted, finally snapping out of his shock. He rushed toward the stage. "That's enough." But Diane wasn't done. She started laughing, a wild, uncontrollable laugh that made everyone in the room deeply uncomfortable. And then she started singing. It wasn't just singing, it was a full-on performance. Diane stood on that stage, microphone in hand, and started belting out a Beyoncé song. I recognized it immediately. It was Crazy in Love. She was swaying her hips, attempting dance moves that she had no business attempting in her current state, and singing at the top of her lungs with absolutely no rhythm or pitch. The band looked horrified. The guests looked shocked. And I sat there, champagne glass still in my hand, trying not to laugh. Gregory finally made it to the stage and tried to pull her down, but Diane pushed him away. "I am having my moment," she shouted into the microphone. "This is my moment. Everyone deserves a moment." She kicked off her remaining heel. Apparently she had lost the other one somewhere along the way, and started dancing barefoot on the stage. Her expensive dress was getting dirty from the stage floor. Her perfectly styled hair was falling out of its pins, and her makeup was smudged from all the sweating she was doing from her impromptu performance. But the absolute worst part, or best part, depending on how you looked at it, came when she decided the stage wasn't enough. She wanted to be closer to her audience. She wanted to really perform. So she stepped off the stage and headed straight for the cake table. "No," I whispered, watching in disbelief. She wouldn't. But she did. Diane climbed up onto the cake table, still singing, still dancing, her bare feet dangerously close to our beautiful 3-tier wedding cake that had cost more than my first car. The table wobbled under her weight. People gasped. Someone screamed. And then it happened. Diane tried to do some kind of spin move, lost her balance, and her foot went straight into the bottom tier of the cake. White frosting exploded everywhere. She yelped, trying to catch herself, but instead ended up sitting down directly on the middle tier. The entire cake collapsed under her, covering her designer dress in buttercream and fondant. The room erupted into chaos. Some people rushed forward to help. Others backed away, not wanting to get involved. A few were openly laughing now, no longer able to contain themselves. Someone's aunt had her phone out, recording the whole thing. Diane sat there in the ruins of our wedding cake, frosting in her hair, looking around in confusion like she couldn't understand how she had gotten there. "I was just dancing," she said, her words still slurred. "I was just having fun." Ethan finally reached his mother and helped pull her out of the cake. She was covered head to toe in white frosting, pieces of cake clinging to her dress and her hair. She looked like she had been in a food fight. "I think we need to get you home," Gregory said firmly, his face red with embarrassment. "But the party just started," Diane protested, even as her husband and son escorted her toward the exit. "I was just getting warmed up. I have more songs. I know all the words to Single Ladies." As they led her away, she turned back to wave at the guests. "Thank you, everyone. You've been a wonderful audience. Don't forget to tip your servers." And then she was gone, leaving behind a destroyed cake table and a reception hall full of stunned guests who would definitely be talking about this wedding for years to come. The moment the door closed behind them, the room exploded with chatter. Everyone was talking at once, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was she drunk? Was she on drugs? Had she completely lost her mind? I sat there, still holding my champagne glass, and tried to process everything. Part of me felt vindicated. Diane had gotten exactly what she had intended for me. But another part of me felt strangely guilty, like maybe I should have just called her out from the beginning instead of switching the glasses. One of my bridesmaids, Sophia, came over and sat beside me. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I think so." "That was insane," Sophia said, shaking her head. "I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. What do you think happened to her?" I hesitated. Should I tell her the truth? Should I explain what I had seen, what Diane had done, how I had switched our glasses? But before I could answer, Ethan returned. He looked exhausted, embarrassed, and completely overwhelmed. He sat down next to me and put his head in his hands. "I am so sorry," he said. "I have no idea what just happened. My mom has never acted like that before. Something must be wrong with her. Maybe she had an allergic reaction to something. Or maybe she mixed medications. Or—" "Ethan," I interrupted gently. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with concern. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide whether to come clean about what I had seen, about what Diane had tried to do, about why she had ended up making a complete fool of herself in front of everyone we knew. The truth would come out eventually. It always did. And when it did, I wanted to make sure I was the one telling it. "Right before the toast," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "I saw your mother put something in my champagne glass." Ethan stared at me. "What?" "I saw her drop something into my drink. I don't know what it was, but I switched our glasses before the toast. Whatever she put in there, she ended up drinking it herself." The look on Ethan's face went from confusion to disbelief to horror in the span of about 5 seconds. "Are you saying," he said quietly, "that my mother tried to drug you at our wedding?" I nodded, and everything changed. Ethan didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat there, staring at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. The reception continued around us, music playing, guests chatting nervously about what they had just witnessed, servers attempting to clean up the cake disaster, but we were in our own bubble of tension. "That's impossible," he finally said. "My mother wouldn't do something like that. She might not be your biggest fan, but she wouldn't actually try to hurt you." I felt my chest tighten. Of course he didn't believe me. Diane was his mother. I was just the girl he had known for 2 years, the one his mother had spent that entire time trying to convince him was wrong for him. "I saw what I saw," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "She waited until you were across the room, until no one was watching, and she dropped something into my glass. It happened right before the toast." "But you can't be sure," Ethan insisted. "Maybe you saw something fall from the ceiling, or maybe it was just a reflection from the lights, or—" "Ethan." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Do you really think your mother's behavior tonight was normal? Do you think she just randomly decided to climb on stage and sing Beyoncé? Do you think she purposely destroyed our wedding cake for fun?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see the conflict on his face. He wanted to defend his mother, wanted to believe she was incapable of something so malicious. But he had also just witnessed her acting completely out of character, doing things she would never normally do. "Even if something was in her drink," he said carefully, "that doesn't prove she put it there. Maybe someone else did it as a prank. Maybe it was meant for someone else, and it ended up in her glass by accident." I felt tears prick at my eyes. This was our wedding day. The day we had planned for months. The day we had promised to support each other through everything. And here he was, making excuses for his mother instead of listening to me. I know what I saw, I repeated. And if you don't believe me, then we have a much bigger problem than your mother's behavior. Before Ethan could respond, Sophia appeared beside us again. Sorry to interrupt, she said, glancing between us nervously. But Gregory just called. They're at the hospital with Diane. Apparently she's getting worse instead of better, and the doctors want to run some tests. Ethan stood up immediately. I need to go. Of course, I said, even though my heart was sinking. Go be with your family. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. We'll talk about this later, okay? After we figure out what's wrong with my mom. And then he was gone, leaving me alone at our head table while our wedding reception continued without us. Sophia sat down next to me and took my hand. Do you want to tell me what's really going on? I did. I told her everything. About Diane dropping something in my champagne, about switching the glasses, about how whatever she had intended for me had ended up affecting her instead. Sophia listened without interrupting, her eyes getting wider with each detail. Holy shit, she breathed when I finished. Tessa, that's attempted poisoning. That's a crime. I know, I whispered, but I have no proof. It's just my word against hers, and she's unconscious in a hospital right now while I'm here at my wedding reception. Then we need to get proof, Sophia said firmly. Where's your glass? The one you switched? I looked around our table. Both champagne glasses were still there, mostly empty but not completely drained. That one, I said, pointing to the glass in front of Diane's empty seat. Sophia carefully picked it up by the stem, trying not to smudge any potential fingerprints. We need to save this. If there's anything in here that shouldn't be, the hospital can test for it. But what if I'm wrong? I asked. What if there's nothing in there and I accuse my mother-in-law of trying to drug me on my wedding day for no reason? Then we'll deal with that, Sophia said. But Tessa, you need to protect yourself. If she really did try to hurt you, you can't just let that go. And if she didn't, then the test will prove it, and everyone will know you made an honest mistake. She was right. I knew she was right. But I also knew that testing that glass would change everything. It would turn this into something real, something that couldn't be taken back or explained away. It would force Ethan to choose between believing his mother and believing me. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that choice. Let me hold on to this, Sophia said, wrapping the glass carefully in a napkin. You don't have to do anything with it right now. But if things get worse, if Diane tries to turn this around on you somehow, you'll have evidence. I nodded, grateful for her support, even if I wasn't sure what to do with it. The reception continued, but it felt wrong now. Ethan was at the hospital. My mother-in-law had destroyed our cake and humiliated herself in front of everyone. And I was sitting at my wedding reception, suspecting my husband's mother of trying to drug me, with no proof except a glass of champagne that might contain something dangerous. My own mother came over, looking concerned. Sweetheart, are you okay? Do you want to leave? We can end the reception early if you need to. Part of me wanted to say yes. I wanted to go home, take off this wedding dress, and pretend none of this had happened. But another part of me refused to let Diane ruin this day, any more than she already had. This was my wedding. I had worked hard for this, planned every detail, dreamed about this moment for years. I wasn't going to let her take it away from me. No, I said, standing up. We're going to keep celebrating. This is my wedding day, and I'm not letting anyone ruin it. My mother smiled, proud. That's my girl. I spent the next 2 hours dancing with my friends, eating the appetizers we had carefully selected, and trying to enjoy what was left of my reception. People kept asking about Diane, about what had happened, but I just smiled and said she wasn't feeling well. I didn't tell them what I suspected. I didn't tell them what I had seen. Not yet. But around 9 that evening, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Tessa," he said, his voice tight. "You need to come to the hospital. Now." I arrived at Columbus General Hospital still wearing my wedding dress. Sophia had driven me, refusing to let me go alone, and we walked through the emergency room entrance, getting strange looks from everyone we passed. I probably looked ridiculous, a bride in full makeup and a white gown, rushing through a hospital like I was in some kind of dramatic movie. Ethan met me in the waiting room. His tie was loosened, his jacket was off, and he looked exhausted. "They're running tests," he said, without preamble. "The doctors think she ingested some kind of sedative or tranquilizer, something that affected her inhibitions and motor control." My heart started pounding. This was it. This was the moment where everything I suspected would be confirmed or denied. "They asked if she had been drinking," Ethan continued. "I told them she only had 1 glass of champagne during the toast, but that doesn't explain why she reacted so strongly." I swallowed hard. "Ethan, they want to know if anyone might have put something in her drink," he interrupted. "They're asking if this could have been intentional." The way he said it, the way he looked at me when he said it, made my blood run cold. He wasn't asking me if I knew anything. He was asking me if I had done something. "You think I drugged your mother?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "No," he said quickly. Tessa, you said you switched the glasses. You said you saw her put something in your drink, and then you switched them. So if there was something in that drink, something that made her act like that, then she did it to herself," I finished. "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you." Gregory appeared in the hallway, looking older than I had ever seen him. "The doctors want to talk to all of us," he said quietly. "They have some questions about what happened tonight." We followed him to a small consultation room where a doctor in blue scrubs was waiting. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Lewis, and she had the kind of serious expression that meant she wasn't here to deliver good news. "Diane is stable," she began, "but we've identified the substance in her system. It's a prescription sedative called lorazepam, commonly known by the brand name Ativan. It's used to treat anxiety and insomnia, but in high doses or when mixed with alcohol, it can cause severe disorientation, loss of inhibition, and impaired motor function." Gregory frowned. "Diane doesn't take that medication. She's never had a prescription for anything like that." "That's what concerns us," Dr. Lewis said. "This wasn't a therapeutic dose. This was significantly more than would be prescribed, which suggests it wasn't taken voluntarily or wasn't intended for her." There was a heavy silence in the room. I could feel all 3 of them looking at me, even though no one said anything directly. "Earlier tonight," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Before the toast at our wedding reception, I saw Diane put something in my champagne glass. I switched our glasses before the toast. Whatever was meant for me, she drank instead." Gregory's face went pale. Ethan looked torn between shock and disbelief. Dr. Lewis pulled out a notepad. "You witnessed her tampering with your drink?" the doctor asked. "Yes," I said. "She was sitting right next to me at the head table. Everyone was getting ready for the toast, and I saw her hand hover over my glass. I saw something drop from her fingers into the champagne. I switched the glasses while she wasn't looking, and then we all drank during the toast." "This is ridiculous," Gregory said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Diane would never do something like that. There has to be another explanation." "Where would she even get medication like that?" Ethan asked, looking at his father. "Does she have access to anything like lorazepam?" Gregory hesitated. It was only for a second, but I caught it. So did Ethan. "Dad?" Ethan pressed. "Your Aunt Beverly," Gregory finally said. "Diane's sister. She was prescribed Ativan after her divorce last year. She was having trouble sleeping, dealing with anxiety. Diane has been helping take care of her, managing her medications. Dr. Lewis made a note. So Diane would have had access to this medication. But that doesn't mean she used it, Gregory insisted. Maybe it fell out of her purse by accident. Maybe she was carrying some for Beverly and didn't realize she had it. Into my champagne glass? I asked, right before the toast. By accident? I saved the glass. Sophia spoke up for the first time. She had been standing quietly by the door, but now she stepped forward and held up the napkin-wrapped champagne flute. This is the glass Diane drank from, the one that was originally Tessa's. If there's any residue of the medication in here, it'll prove what happened. Dr. Lewis took the glass carefully. We'll have the lab test this right away. If there are traces of lorazepam in the glass, and we can confirm it matches what's in Diane's system, that would support your account of what happened. This is insane, Ethan said, running his hands through his hair. Why would my mother try to drug Tessa? What would she possibly gain from that? I could have listed a dozen reasons. I could have reminded him of every cruel comment his mother had made, every attempt to sabotage our relationship, every time she had made it clear she didn't think I was good enough for him. But this wasn't the time. I think we should wait for the test results before we jump to any conclusions, Gregory said stiffly. There could be a perfectly innocent explanation for all of this. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, his wife had done something unforgivable. Dr. Lewis excused herself to take the glass to the lab, promising to have preliminary results within an hour. The four of us sat in that small consultation room in awkward silence, nobody quite knowing what to say. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Are you okay? Do you want me to come to the hospital? I texted back, I'm fine. Stay at the reception. I'll call you later. But I wasn't fine. My wedding day had turned into a nightmare. My husband was sitting across from me looking confused and hurt, unsure whether to believe his wife or defend his mother. My father-in-law was in denial about what his wife had done. And somewhere down the hall, my mother-in-law was lying in a hospital bed, suffering the effects of her own malicious plan. Can I see her? I asked quietly. Can I talk to Diane? Ethan looked surprised. Why would you want to do that? Because I need to hear her say it, I said. I need to hear her explain why she tried to do this to me. Dr. Lewis returned 45 minutes later, and the expression on her face told me everything I needed to know before she even opened her mouth. The preliminary tests on the glass confirm the presence of lorazepam, she said. The concentration suggests that multiple pills were dissolved in the liquid. We're estimating at least 3 to 4 standard doses, which would have been enough to cause significant impairment in anyone who consumed it. The room went silent. Gregory sank into his chair, his face ashen. Ethan stared at the doctor like she had just told him the world was ending. And I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness wash over me. I had been right. Diane had tried to drug me, but being right didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. I want to press charges, I said clearly. What she did was attempted poisoning. That's a crime. Tessa, wait. Ethan started. No, I interrupted. I'm not waiting. Your mother tried to drug me at our wedding reception. She wanted me to humiliate myself in front of everyone we know, probably hoping it would be bad enough that you would leave me. She was willing to risk my health, maybe even my life, just to get rid of me. I'm not going to just let that go. She's my mother, Ethan said, his voice breaking. She's confused right now. She's sick. She's manipulative, I said. And she's been trying to destroy our relationship since the day we met. You know it's true, Ethan. You've seen it. You've just been making excuses for her because you didn't want to believe your own mother could be that cruel. Gregory stood up abruptly. I need some air. He walked out of the room, leaving the 3 of us behind. Dr. Lewis cleared her throat. Diane is awake now if you'd like to speak with her. But I should warn you, she's still somewhat disoriented. The effects of the medication haven't completely worn off yet. I want to see her, I said. Ethan grabbed my hand. Tessa, please, can we just wait until tomorrow, after everyone's had time to process this? I looked at my husband, my brand new husband, who I had married just hours ago, and I saw the pain in his eyes. He wasn't a bad person. He wasn't trying to protect his mother at my expense. He was just caught in the middle of something horrible, trying to figure out how to love both his wife and his mother when they were on opposite sides of an impossible situation. I'll wait, I said quietly. But tomorrow, I'm talking to a lawyer, and I'm going to the police. What she did was wrong, Ethan, and someone needs to hold her accountable for it. He nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. I know. We left the hospital around midnight. Sophia drove me back to the hotel where Ethan and I were supposed to spend our wedding night. Instead of the romantic evening we had planned, we sat on opposite sides of the hotel bed, still in our wedding clothes, not touching. I'm sorry, Ethan finally said. I should have believed you from the start. I should have trusted you instead of defending her. Why didn't you? I asked. It wasn't accusatory. I genuinely wanted to understand. He was quiet for a long moment. Because if I admitted that my mother was capable of something like that, then I'd have to admit that she's not the person I thought she was. I'd have to accept that she's been hurting you, hurting us, and I let it happen. I'd have to face the fact that I chose her feelings over yours more times than I can count. You did, I agreed. You did choose her over me. Multiple times. I know. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for that, if you'll let me. I wanted to say yes immediately. I wanted to forgive him and move forward and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. Not yet. I need time, I said. I need to figure out if I can trust you again. If I can trust that the next time something happens with your mother, you'll stand by me instead of making excuses for her. That's fair, he said quietly. We fell asleep that night, without touching. The space between us on the bed, feeling like an ocean. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Sophia. You need to see this. She had sent me a link to a video. I clicked on it, and my heart sank. It was footage from our wedding reception, the moment Diane climbed onto the cake table, singing and dancing before falling into our wedding cake. Someone had recorded the whole thing and posted it online, and it was already going viral. The caption read, "Mother-in-law from hell ruins wedding reception." There were thousands of comments. Some people thought it was hilarious. Others felt bad for Diane, assuming she must have been drunk or having some kind of breakdown. A few people recognized her, tagging her full name and the country club she belonged to. The video had been shared hundreds of times. I showed Ethan. His face went even paler than it had been the night before. This is going to destroy her reputation, he said. The country club, her charity work, all of it. Good, I said flatly. She tried to destroy mine. But then I got another text, this time from an unknown number. You did this on purpose. You switched the glasses knowing what would happen. You wanted to humiliate me. You will pay for this. It was from Diane. She was awake. She knew what had happened. And instead of apologizing or showing even a shred of remorse, she was threatening me. I showed Ethan the text. Do you see now? I asked. Do you see what kind of person your mother really is? He read the message 3 times, his jaw clenched tighter with each reading. Then he picked up his phone and called his father. Dad, he said when Gregory answered, we need to talk about Mom, and about what's going to happen next. What happened next was exactly what Diane had feared most. By that afternoon, the video had been seen by everyone in their social circle. The country club where Diane had been a member for 20 years started receiving calls from embarrassed members. Her charity foundation held an emergency board meeting, and the local news picked up the story, not because of the viral video, but because someone had leaked information about the hospital visit and the lorazepam in her system. The headline read, "Prominent Columbus socialite hospitalized after allegedly drugging own daughter-in-law at wedding." Diane's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The more she tried to deny it, the more evidence came out. The lab confirmed the lorazepam in the champagne glass. Security footage from the reception showed her hand hovering over my glass. And her own sister Beverly confirmed that several pills were missing from her prescription bottle after Diane had visited her the day before the wedding. But the worst blow came from an unexpected source. Gregory, who had always defended his wife, who had always made excuses for her behavior, finally had enough. He hired a lawyer, not to protect Diane, but to protect himself. He filed for separation, claiming he had been unaware of the extent of his wife's manipulation and cruelty, and he wanted to distance himself from her actions. Diane was alone, publicly humiliated, facing criminal charges, and abandoned by almost everyone who had once been in her corner. And my marriage to Ethan was hanging by a thread. 3 days after our wedding, I sat in a lawyer's office in downtown Columbus, still processing everything that had happened. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, who specialized in criminal cases, listened carefully as I recounted the entire story. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and by the end of our meeting, she looked both impressed and concerned. "You have a strong case," Patricia said. "The physical evidence is solid. The lab results, the security footage, the witness statements. Diane's own text message threatening you after the incident doesn't help her either. That shows intent and a lack of remorse." "What happens now?" I asked. "We file a police report formally charging her with attempted poisoning and assault. Given the evidence, the prosecutor's office will almost certainly pursue charges. She'll be arrested, arraigned, and depending on how she pleads, this could go to trial." The word trial made my stomach twist. I imagined sitting in a courtroom, having to relive that night over and over, watching Ethan torn between supporting me and grieving the loss of his mother's freedom. But I also knew I couldn't back down now. What Diane had done was criminal, and she needed to face consequences. "Do it," I said. "File the report." Patricia nodded. "I'll get started on this today. Be prepared for things to get ugly. Diane will likely try to discredit you, claim you switched the glasses to frame her, or argue that you're doing this for attention or money. People like her don't go down quietly." She was right. By the time I left Patricia's office, Diane had already posted on social media, something she rarely did, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Her post was carefully crafted to paint herself as the victim. "I am heartbroken by the false accusations being made against me. I suffered a severe medical reaction at my son's wedding, and instead of receiving compassion, I am being vilified by someone who has never accepted me as family. I pray that the truth will come out, and justice will prevail." The post had dozens of comments within minutes. Some people supported her, expressing sympathy and outrage on her behalf. Others questioned her story, especially after the viral video had shown the world exactly how she had behaved. The comments section became a battlefield between people who believed her and people who believed me. I didn't respond. Patricia had advised me not to engage on social media at all, to let the evidence speak for itself. But it was hard watching people I barely knew. Friends of Diane's from the country club, women she volunteered with at charity events, defend her and attack me without knowing the full story. Ethan was caught in the middle of all of it. His phone rang constantly with calls from relatives demanding to know what was really going on. His father called him every few hours, alternating between anger at Diane and guilt about abandoning her. And through it all, Ethan had to figure out where he stood, with his mother or with his wife. We were staying in a hotel while we figured things out. Our apartment didn't feel safe anymore, not after Diane's threatening text message. Ethan suggested we go to his father's house, but I refused. I wasn't going to hide or act like I had done something wrong. On the fourth day, Diane was arrested. The news spread quickly through social media and local news outlets. There were photos of her being led out of her house in handcuffs, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her expensive clothes wrinkled like she had been sleeping in them. She looked nothing like the polished, put-together woman who had always judged me for not being good enough. The arraignment was scheduled for the following week. Patricia assured me I wouldn't have to attend, but I wanted to be there. I wanted Diane to see me sitting in that courtroom, calm and composed, while she faced the consequences of what she had tried to do. Ethan asked if he could come with me. I told him yes, but I also told him he needed to make a choice about where his loyalty lay. I wasn't going to force him to choose between his mother and me, but I also wasn't going to stay in a marriage where I came second to someone who had tried to poison me. "I choose you," he said quietly. "I should have chosen you from the beginning. I should have seen what she was doing, should have protected you instead of making excuses for her. I'm choosing you now, Tessa, even if it means losing my relationship with my mother." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did believe him, but another part of me was still hurt, still angry that it had taken something this extreme for him to finally stand up to Diane. "Actions matter more than words," I told him. "Show me you mean it." The arraignment arrived. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, sterile and cold. Diane sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who kept whispering in her ear. She didn't look at me when I entered, but I could feel her awareness of my presence. The prosecutor presented the charges: attempted poisoning, assault, and reckless endangerment. Diane pleaded not guilty, her voice steady, but her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. The judge set bail at $50,000 and scheduled a preliminary hearing for 3 weeks later. Diane's lawyer argued that she wasn't a flight risk, that she had deep roots in the community, that she had never been in trouble before. The judge agreed to release her on bail with the condition that she have no contact with me whatsoever. As Diane stood to leave, she finally looked at me. The hatred in her eyes was unmistakable. The preliminary hearing was where everything fell apart for Diane. Patricia had warned me this would happen, that once all the evidence was laid out in a formal setting, Diane's carefully constructed defense would crumble. But I hadn't expected it to happen so spectacularly. The prosecutor presented the lab results showing the lorazepam in both the champagne glass and in Diane's blood work. They showed the security footage from the reception, zoomed in and enhanced to clearly show Diane's hand hovering over my glass, her fingers opening, something small dropping into the liquid. They presented Beverly's testimony about the missing pills from her prescription bottle. They even had testimony from several wedding guests who had witnessed Diane's bizarre behavior and could confirm it was completely out of character. Diane's lawyer tried to argue that the footage was inconclusive, that Beverly could have miscounted her pills, that Diane's behavior could have been caused by an undiagnosed medical condition. But with each argument, the prosecutor had a counterpoint backed by solid evidence. Then came Diane's own text message to me, the one where she had accused me of switching the glasses on purpose and threatened that I would pay for this. The prosecutor pointed out that this message proved Diane knew exactly what had happened, that something had been in that glass, and it was only meant for me. If she was truly innocent, the prosecutor argued, why would she send a threatening message to the victim? Why would she acknowledge that the glasses had been switched? An innocent person would have been confused, would have asked what happened, would have expressed concern for their daughter-in-law's safety. Instead, she immediately blamed the victim and made threats. I watched Diane's face as the prosecutor spoke. She tried to maintain her composure, tried to look calm and collected, but I could see the cracks forming. Her jaw was clenched so tight I thought her teeth might break. Her hands were fisted in her lap. And when the judge asked if she had anything to say, she made a critical mistake. She spoke. "That girl has ruined my life," Diane said, her voice shaking with rage. "She came into my family and poisoned my son against me. She turned my husband against me. She orchestrated this entire thing to humiliate me and destroy my reputation. Yes, I sent her that message because she deserved to know what she had done. She switched those glasses knowing full well what would happen. She wanted me to suffer." Her lawyer tried to stop her, putting a hand on her arm and whispering urgently. But Diane shook him off. "I have spent 30 years building my reputation in this community," she continued. "I have raised a son, supported countless charities, contributed to this city in ways that girl could never understand. And now I'm supposed to sit here and be accused of attempted poisoning because she decided to play a cruel trick at her own wedding." "Mrs. Williams," the judge said sternly, "I would advise you to stop talking." But Diane was beyond listening. 2 years of hatred, of resentment, of watching her perfect plans fall apart, all came pouring out in that courtroom. "She was never good enough for Ethan," Diane said. "Never. A kindergarten teacher with no family connections, no breeding, no class. I tried everything to make him see reason, to show him he could do better, but he was blinded by her. And now look what she's done. She's destroyed our family." The courtroom was silent. Even her own lawyer looked horrified. The judge let her finish, let her dig her own grave with every word. Then he spoke, his voice cold and measured. "Mrs. Williams, based on the evidence presented today and your own statements just now, I am ordering you bound over for trial. Furthermore, I am increasing your bail to $100,000 and mandating that you wear an ankle monitor until trial. You are to have absolutely no contact with the victim or any members of her family. Do you understand?" Diane's face went white. "Your Honor, Do you understand?" the judge repeated. "Yes," she whispered. As the bailiff led her out of the courtroom, Diane looked back at me one last time. The hatred was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Fear. She was finally realizing that this wasn't going away, that she couldn't talk her way out of it, or buy her way out of it, or manipulate her way out of it. She was going to face real consequences for what she had done. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Patricia had warned me they would be, and she had coached me on what to say. I stood on the courthouse steps, Ethan beside me, and made a brief statement. "I'm grateful that the justice system is taking this matter seriously," I said. "What happened at my wedding was not a mistake or an accident. It was a deliberate attempt to harm me, and I'm thankful that the evidence has proven that. I hope this sends a message that this kind of behavior is unacceptable, regardless of who you are or what your status in the community might be." The reporters shouted questions, but Patricia guided me away before I could answer any of them. As we walked to the car, I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Gregory, Ethan's father, standing at a distance. He caught my eye and nodded once, a gesture that seemed to say he believed me, that he was sorry, that he wished things had been different. It was the closest thing to an apology I would probably ever get from him. The trial took place 8 weeks after our wedding. 8 weeks of living in limbo, of watching Diane's world collapse while trying to build a new life with Ethan. 8 weeks of therapy sessions, of difficult conversations, of figuring out if our marriage could survive what his mother had done. Ethan proved himself in those 8 weeks. He testified at the trial, confirming that his mother had access to his aunt's medication and admitting that she had always been hostile toward me. He sat beside me in court every single day, holding my hand when the prosecution showed the security footage again, when they played recordings of Diane's voicemails to Ethan, where she said terrible things about me, when Beverly testified about how Diane had asked specific questions about the effects of lorazepam weeks before our wedding. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Diane guilty on all counts: attempted poisoning, assault, and reckless endangerment. When the verdict was read, Diane didn't react. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, like she couldn't believe this was really happening to her. Her lawyer requested leniency during sentencing, arguing that she had no prior criminal record, that she had contributed significantly to the community, that she was unlikely to reoffend. The judge was not moved. "Mrs. Williams," he said during sentencing, "you attempted to drug your own daughter-in-law at her wedding reception. You showed no remorse when confronted with your actions. You attempted to shift blame onto the victim and threatened her safety. Your status in the community and your charitable work do not excuse what you did. In fact, they make it worse, because you used your position and privilege to believe you were above consequences." He sentenced her to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. He also ordered her to pay restitution for our destroyed wedding cake, our hospital bills, and my legal fees. The amount came to nearly $40,000. Diane was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs for the second time. This time, she didn't look back at me. She kept her eyes forward, her chin up, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, even as her entire world crumbled around her. The country club revoked her membership. The charity foundation she had worked with for 15 years removed her from their board and scrubbed her name from their website. Friends who had defended her initially began to distance themselves once the guilty verdict came in. Her social media accounts went silent, then disappeared entirely. Gregory finalized their divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. He sold their house, the one where Ethan had grown up, the one filled with memories of family dinners and holiday celebrations, and moved into a smaller condo across town. He reached out to me once after the trial, apologizing for not seeing sooner what kind of person Diane had become. I accepted his apology, though things between us would never be easy. Ethan struggled the most. He had lost his mother, not to death, but to her own actions. He had to reconcile the woman who had raised him with the woman who had tried to poison his wife. Some days were harder than others. Some days he was angry at her. Some days he grieved for the relationship they would never have again. And some days, he just felt numb. But through it all, he stood by me. He stood. He went to therapy, worked on understanding why he had enabled his mother's behavior for so long, and made a conscious effort to build a marriage based on trust and mutual support rather than obligation and guilt. We eventually moved to a different city, wanting a fresh start away from the memories and the gossip and the weight of everything that had happened. We found a small house in Akron, about 2 hours north of Columbus, and started building a life that was truly ours. The viral video of Diane singing Beyoncé and falling into our wedding cake still surfaces online occasionally, usually with captions like "Karma is real," or "When you try to ruin someone's wedding and end up ruining your own life." I don't watch it anymore. I don't need to. The memory of that night, both the horror and the strange satisfaction of watching her suffer the consequences of her own cruelty, is permanently etched in my mind. Diane served her full sentence. She was released from prison after 3 years with no early parole, having failed to demonstrate sufficient remorse or rehabilitation. She moved to a different state, trying to rebuild her life away from the shame and notoriety she had created for herself. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment in Florida, working as a receptionist at a medical clinic, a far cry from her former life of luxury and social prominence. As for Ethan and me, we celebrated our 5th anniversary last month. We have a 2-year-old daughter named Sophie, and another baby on the way. Our life isn't perfect, but it's ours, built on honesty and trust, and the knowledge that we chose each other, even when that choice was painful. Sometimes I think about that moment at our wedding reception, watching Diane's hand hover over my champagne glass, making the split-second decision to switch them. It wasn't revenge I was seeking in that moment. It was self-preservation. But what followed, the spectacular unraveling of her carefully constructed life, felt like the universe delivering justice in the most poetic way possible. I learned something important through all of this. You don't always need to actively seek revenge against people who try to hurt you. Sometimes you just need to step aside and let them destroy themselves.